So we are in session 6E, the second Pecha Kucha session in the program, and I think by now you are aware of how Hopin functions or what we would like you to do to interact with the panelists. But I give a quick update on that for those who have been sleeping the last 2 days or haven't been around. So the idea is to go to the session view. That's quite important, not the event view, because otherwise you are talking to the entire audience of the entire group of participants of Urbanism Next. So in session view, you can communicate with us, with the speakers, as well as with your counterparts in the audience through the chat function. We won't be using the polls, but you can also ask questions in the Q&A, and that also gives the opportunity to the speakers to answer in writing, so that can be practical throughout the 1 hour and a half session we have. You can take a look at who's in the session by using the People tab. And you can also fiddle around a bit with how your screen looks by pushing buttons like the hide chat or go to the full screen icon mode. We will record this meeting, so that could determine a bit how you intervene in the session. And we will not give you the floor being in the audience, so we will communicate by chat and Q&A. After the session, you can also still enjoy the conference environment. So there are different networking functions. You can check the event chat and participants tab. You can send direct messages to other participants, for instance. It's like a real conference, but then online. So we have a Pecha Kucha session today for you, planned with 7 speakers. I will keep that screen, but I also need a bit of to flag up my notes for me. So when I was preparing this session, I was thinking of my my younger days when there was no COVID around, and when young people went to festivals. And in festivals, you sometimes had the skate stage. That was the really cool hangout where the most rock and roll kids were doing their magic. And this is also, I see the Pecha Kucha session a bit as the equivalent of Urbanism Next skate stage. This is a creative session where the best creatives come together. And we'll have 7 of these rock and roll heroes on stage in the next hour and a half. We'll be working with the method of Pecha Kuchas. That means that the presenters have got the instruction to bring a fixed number of slides, 20 slides, which each will be shown for 20 seconds. So that gives you, the audience, the advantage that you are not starting to listen to a speaker without that you know how long the presentation will last. So you know what will be happening, and that also gives the opportunity to touch upon a very broad, varied number of topics. So that's really the advantage of this session. So in the rock and roll spirit of things, I was thinking of starting each presentation by saying, and Manon, you have to listen because you are the person who will manage the slides, and also the speaker should be aware. So my plan is to say 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey ho, let's go. Yeah? A bit in the Ramones style, if you would still remember the Ramones. I do. So that would be the cue. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey ho, let's go. That's the cue, and then the presentation starts. But okay, enough silliness. We move to the program, where we have 7 speakers. Where we touch upon several topics. So we we start with Uwe Winter, who will talk about vertical mobility. John Dales will talk about curbside management. Dylan Khélif will talk about MaaS. Diogo Martins will talk about accessible solutions. Laura Babío will talk about new ways of sustainable urban mobility planning, and specifically the resilience side of things. And Manon will present a number of projects POLIS is involved in. And we end and be keeping the rock and roll festival idea in mind. The last one, Lucy, should then be the top of the bill, with Lucy Sadler, who will talk about the Reveal project, a project working on urban vehicle access regulations. So that's the menu we have prepared for you. And we'll start with Uwe. I will stop sharing my slides so that that can be his presentation can be prepared by Manon. So Uwe is a graduate engineer in manufacturing. He has spent his whole professional life as an engaged fighter for high quality products and mobility solutions. And after many successful years in the automobile industry, he has joined TK Elevator in 2018, where he's now responsible as the CEO for the development of and industrialization for the first ropeless high-rise elevator. And the idea is that that kind of solutions can drive vertical and horizontal mobility. And it is called a multi, and we are very curious to hear of that, because we know that vertical mobility is becoming much more important in cities. Also, for instance, in view of future drones, access to drones locations, landing locations. So Uwe, I will say 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey ho, let's go, and I will disappear. Yep.
Okay. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for Urbanism Next team for the invitation. My name is Uwe Winter. I'm the CEO and the multi, and the first ropeless high-rise elevator that also can ride horizontally. Welcome to a short overview on our contribution for future mobility. TK Elevator is a worldwide known company where we deliver passenger transport solutions like elevators and escalators. And for our customers, we are offering highly individual and innovative products where desired. And just a clue, you see digital solutions, boarding systems for passengers, stair lifts, but then for sure also the multi I'm sharing today. Until 2015, 2 billion people will move to cities. This will lead to a share of nearly 70% of global population living in cities. Each day we are building 88 square kilometers of new urban areas the size of Manhattan. As space is limited, there is only one direction left, and that's up. Since 2000, the number of subtall buildings has been tripled, and new record heights are on this threshold. The gray colored towers currently are under construction. If you look at the black towers, there are quite a few below 500 meters, and this is no coincidence. 500 meters is an important border for rope-driven elevators, as the mass of the rope would be too much. The higher the building, the more space elevators will occupy. And in order to organize the passenger transportation, you simply need more elevators to reach your capacity. Remember, typically there is only one cabin in each shaft, a very poor utilization of surveys provision. The TK Elevator company has very innovative engineer, and we have more than 65 years of experience in high-rise buildings. And we have experience with Paternoster, Twin, the first elevator with 2 cabs in one shaft, and the new linear technology from the transfer pit. When we look at urban mobility, first of all, we see the upcoming opportunities of interconnectivity between all kinds of transportation systems. Just imagine your elevator already knows about a group of visitors entering your parking area. Just imagine your elevator already identifies the final destination of your visitor before even entering manually a floor number. Remember the limits of a rope elevator. With a height of 500 millimeters, the elevator rope would become so heavy that it would collapse under its own mass. Additionally, the build sway will turn the ropes into a dangerous source, being able to destroy the whole elevator shaft from within. With the linear drive, we are overcoming these limits. Like the Paternoster in the past, Multi is using several cars in one shaft, but this time we stop at the desired floor and of course with doors, and therefore absolutely safe for drive passengers. The exchanger is one of our most fascinating parts of the multi-system. It's a mechanical miracle and a groundbreaking innovation for the transportation in the building. It's a completely new component in the elevator industry and capable of turning cars from turning vertically to horizontal. Multi will thereby be able to orchestra the whole passenger transportation flow in the building by using loops. With no ropes attached, Multi will be also able to move horizontally, connecting buildings on whole new levels. You will gain much more flexibility by that. And with Multi, you have a transportation system designed for your peak times, but also transform your different transportation in off-peak times. Thanks to multi-cars in the loop and smarter controller, it is even possible to allow one car per person if desired. Connected to an access control, we can program the system to any kind of needs, be it individualism, privacy, priorities, or health reasons. Of course, we would hope that we can join all together after the pandemic in one cabin. Imagine your building would have a heliport for an air taxi, like shown here. Multi can already foresee an arrival at the helicopter deck, allocating a specific designed VIP cabin just on top of the building and guide you to your executive suite. This is a very important thing also for the last mile connectivity. The multi-system can be used as the backbone of smart buildings connected with any kind of devices from access controls to the delivery robots. Wouldn't it be nice if your next package or pizza would be handed over by a delivery boat? And that's even in a high-rise building. With Multi, we are overcoming the existing limit of high-rise buildings that we are facing now to the traditional rope elevators. Not only the height limit is shifted, we are even able to connect several buildings horizontally. Not only down on earth, but also with sky bridges. This offers a new complete way of 3D plannings in cities. So also we are able to right-size our buildings now. With Multi, it is possible to have multiple cars per shaft, and by that we can offer smaller and less shafts and still offer high cabin frequency, so less waiting time for the passenger. Additionally, there is no need for a machine room at the top of the shaft, so that's a saving for the building. The right sizing enables customer to either build a smaller building and save construction costs, or to increase the rentable space inside the building and earn more money, the whole lifetime of the building. So, of course, the higher the local rent, the higher the profitability is. And the architects can already include Multi in their construction plans today. The DigiPara tool creates BIM files of shafts depending on your individual configuration, like building height, number of floors, and so on. To decide how many transport systems you need for a specific number of people without wasting space and energy, our traffic analysts support our customers right from the beginning. What you can see here is a standard simulation tool that we are using to calculate the passengers' flow in a building and the need of number of elevators. Multi-cars are simulated in real time according to the number of people and floors inside the building, including details like acceleration and deceleration times and needed for passengers to exit the cars and stops. Our holistic approach enables increased rentable space, facilitates seamless passenger flows, and allows high flexible configuration. With decades of experience in high-rise building, TK helps you to create your high-rise visions. The earlier you contact us, the better we can support and consult. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Uwe, for the presentation. I had a bit of a lag to get on stage. Very interesting. So I'm working for a network of local authorities, who many of them also face outdoor, let's say, or public access vertical mobility issues. So escalators, elevators for public use in cities with a lot of orography or a lot of differences in height. is your solution also fit for that kind of solutions? And are you looking at that market?
You mean to have interconnectivities inside the city with the multi-system?
Yeah, but also for public use, let's say, or to see this as part of the public transport system to give people to bridge the heights in cities also.
Yeah, I think this is a very good question, and the way I would phrase it, it depends a little bit on the investor, if he is willing to allow his concept being used inside his building for public transportation. From a technical perspective, this is possible. We have possibilities to identify who has access to a certain cabin. I indicated that with the VIP cabin, so to speak. And that would allow certainly also that kind of traffic flows. The most popular way how you can calculate, or you can imagine that if you would have a visitor platform on the top of a high-rise building, like on the Empire State Building, for example, already today people can move up on a, let's say, kind of a public usage for that kind of event. And it's also considerable that to use that for the sky bridges.
Yeah. We had there are discussions also with, I remember, with International Transport Forum, where there were also in view of the arrival of drones, a use case you've also presented in your slides, that there should be some kind of a movement towards the redesign of buildings with the elevator shafts actually being on the outside in a public access function, so that these drones, with the arrival of more drones, also drones that would have more essential functions that would benefit the entire neighborhood around the building, that there's a reconfiguration of this idea of elevators needed. I don't know if you have any observations on that kind of approach.
Yeah, I'm a little skeptical when it comes to the outside of shafts being mounted to the outside to a building, because it will add a lot of technical complexity coming from the, let's say, temperatures, the wind, and also from a bending perspective of the building. However, if the multi is, or say any elevator is used as a core inside the building, you still can do the same what you have just mentioned, like having certain platform areas, level areas where you can have let me say, drones being landed. The most popular example I want to give on that time all the time is Total Recall. Just watch it and you see its future. That's it.
Okay. Yeah, hopefully not the entire future.
Not the entire one, but this you see on YouTube is the most funny one. Yeah.
Okay. I have one final question, because there's also a question in the Q&A, but I'll start with my own question. It's the same question as I had for you, Pedro. It's asking whether this is also a retrofit solution, or it's more a solution you implement in newly built new buildings.
As we do have a very specific design when it comes to the core of the shaft, and also as we do not have a machine room where normally the machine room is, I would believe commercial-wise it would be limited, but it's not excluded. It's in one-to-one investigation. We actually made some studies in the past already with existing buildings, and depending on how the building was made, it could well pay off. However, the most important benefit of multi to provide more surface, being as unique, and we are utilizing the shafts more effectively, that would be gone, because we have no possibility, or we don't want to have multiple variations of the size of the cabin, because it will always cause a new propulsion system. Therefore, we have standardized cabins, and they should fit then in the already built building.
Okay. And Lucy is asking whether this is also, one of the use cases could also be goods transport in specifically built infrastructures for horizontal underground goods transport, for instance.
Yes, actually, this is what we try to indicate it with the chart with the robots. I personally believe moving goods with a robot into a specific cabin is something we can consider. It depends a bit on what kind of goods, for sure, from the size and the mass. But I would say the individual day-by-day infrastructure goods we can supply, and I think that's the idea of it.
Okay, thank you. I think we have depleted all questions and also the time. So Uwe, thank you very much. And
Appreciate it.
it's an issue we'll definitely keep looking at, also in view of the further blurring between public and private, the built environment, buildings and street, etc. It's a very interesting technology. Thank you.
Appreciate it.
And we'll move to John Dales. Who looks at another side of the spectrum of the urban space. It's the curbside. It's maybe the most contested urban space. And we also understand, as we see new forms of use of curb space appear, that the current most frequent use is probably inadequate for all the functions that could be catered at the curbside. John has done a study for the UK Department for Transportation, and he'll share the insights on that. So John, the floor is yours. I will disappear from the screen, and I also will say the notorious words: 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey ho, let's go.
Thanks very much, Ivo. Thank you very much. Well, we are literally coming back down to a very old tech way. John Dales, I run a very small company called Urban Movement with friends, and we spend most of our time designing streets. We're also doing research. And this is a piece of work, as Ivo said, that we did for the Department for Transport with the University of Leeds. And one of the things was, how are we going to use, and what are the challenges of new technology in terms of managing and designing the curbside? And the first thing we found, even though we do this every day, is actually hang on about the future for the moment. We are doing such a dreadfully poor job at the moment in managing all the different complexities that we've got. This was just a slide that shows all the things that are trying to happen in streets. The yellow bars are headings. Don't worry, you can't read them. The whole point is that there is so much there. Different headings, different things we want to do under different headings for different types of uses. It's incredibly complex, and we are very poor at handling that complexity. One of the things we did was just walk down some streets. Here's a pole. It should have a sign saying how this piece of curbside is supposed to be used. But there is a sign, as you can see on the other side of the, shall we? I found this was really funny. Actually, there is no real sign. This is a gorilla sign that says, like and share this post. There should be stuff there. And so what happens is, even when the regulations are very clear, they are because there's no drop curb, but people do, and when they can't find a space there, they just park on the footway. Both of those cars are solidly parked there. That shouldn't. Enforcement sometimes work better as enforcement, like the bus lane, which is enforced by camera clear, but the bus stop on the right, that bus can't get into the curbside because there's a car illegally parked. If you needed level access to that bus, you couldn't get onto that bus. Lanes they happen at the curbside. This is the same street in Manchester, quite different. On the right, it's a much more generous approach, and that's part wider, which is a real consideration. We're thinking about the length of the street, the width as well, because the street on the right is as traffic management, so there's much less traffic in it. Respect to what happens to the curbside, we started selling fuel on the highway. I'm not a massive fan, although I understand the need for it, but we're going to do it. Let's put the fuel dispensers in the carriage. Having said that, even if they're in the carriageway, the feeder box, the black box there, still needs to be in the footway, and that's a real issue. Again, makes us think about the width of the street. And then we can designate side space for particular, even though that white BMW isn't an E-Tag, then we have disabled vehicles, car vehicles, solo motorcycles, but so if there's no car there, that's wasted space. And then there are as well, there skips, shopping trolleys outside supermarkets there, post boxes there for the whole time, and cycle parking, which of course could be almost anywhere, but because we have to have racks for that, that's actually more permanent than car parking. The car's gone, when the bikes are gone, there's still the parking, there's obviously still the parking hoop there. So all sorts of issues relate to that. And what do we get from all of that? Already been said, it's really contested. The key thing for me is, and thinking about the features, we're doing such a bad job now. We need to make sure we are harnessing technology is not within a framework that makes some kind of sense. We object to lack of compliance, but it's almost inevitable. The key thing as well is this is a public. We need to think about the length, as I've said, not just the. And although flexibility would be great, if rules are more complex, users can't understand them. So it's a real challenge. So we need to be much better to start. We normally don't know, we know very little about that, about communication. And again, although technology offers many opportunities for the future, what do we do right now? Because it's that we found, okay, our starting point is before we think about the future. So we just tried to get this very simple thinking tool together, stuff that people like me, designers, streets, don't really do, which is think for a moment about actually how different users might work out in the street. Then secondly, think about how that might look if we plot them around. So simple. We don't do this. Different users, how much time does that need? That's a permanent use of the street. 15 minutes, they'll need that for an hour. Start thinking about all those different uses that happen in every street and put them into some kind of context. And then we start thinking spatially. You know, a bus stop is as big as it needs to be. The amount of access inside is a given. All of these things have that we need to consider. And if we trying to put too much in the street or allowing too much to happen that really can't happen. To think about it in terms of using new tech, what are we trying to do with our policy priorities remain the same. You know, information will be incredibly important, and that's a real issue for. And we'll be in the future where system can talk to system, which helps with the complexity issues. We need much better. I think that's a key. Helpful. We try and move from a system of enforcement and non-regulation to what I call charging for a service. And we also need to think about both innovation and regulation. The innovation is hopeless if we haven't got a good regulatory background. So here, instead of just move, why don't we just charge more? We could have real penalty charges, but you don't have to fix it. You know, we can manage it through charging. Using. Or in this final one here, yes, the innovation scooters is great, but we need to make sure that they're spatially contained. So the key thing for the public landlord in Britain, we have this rule, my rules will hit the public highway regulation. It's that we need to work out in terms of the application of innovation for users at the curbside. Let us take control.
Thank you, John. Very interesting.
Media.
Okay, good. My curb, my space, my rules, indeed. I don't see any questions in the chat and the Q&A. So please. While Ivo's coming, I should say that guy. No, please do.
Yeah, of course.
So I was
about to say that actually that comedian who plays the pub landlord, he once said a very wise thing. Sorry, but we've got some time delay, which was parents drive their kids to school because they're worried about them getting knocked down by other parents driving their kids to school, which is a kind of thing. Then he went on to say, so we're going to end up with a generation of flat-footed, asthmatic kids with no sense of direction. And I thought that's a really good way of looking at some of the challenges of travel. But anyway, that was a side thing.
Yeah. I have a before going into the Q&A, I think what you didn't talk about is the way local authorities should get organized to do this. And we see in the US, for instance, that there is some kind of an internal institutional rearrangement happening in cities to really manage curbsides in an integrated way. They even bring in the jargon into the names of the department. They become a curbside management unit or a department. Whereas for European cities, the competences are fragmented across different services sometimes. Do you have any? Did you look at that in your study or? the way you organize yourself as
we did. So it's to be honest, a lot of about organization. That one of the, I think, I suppose, is even the people who that we really need that we do. When we change it, well, how much loading do we have at the moment? Well, let's just put that amount back in. There's very little science. So at that level, one is terrible. There are many different responsibilities. And local authorities, they're big organizations. There are a lot. One of the things I've found is that there's only one local, as far as I could find, has an adopted curbside strategy. It's one of the 33 London boroughs. And so hardly anybody is thinking in that integrated way. And that's one of the problems. You've got so many users. Well, what do we do about the bus lane? The cycling? Who's emptying the bins? Who's doing this? Who's doing that? Also, parking enforcement, there isn't an integrated thing. And I suppose really what I'm talking about is, so what's the basis of our system on which we could have a more joined up approach? That idea of thinking the different types of uses, the different activities, and then putting it, it's kind of what we were talking about, which is, yes, the new technology systems are approach joined up and much more comprehensive, then the technology will just perpetuate a system which essentially doesn't work because there is no coordination where, I mean, sorry to keep going on, but it's that list of things that I showed. There is so much trying to happen here. And one person's responsible for that and somebody else is responsible for that. And that's the heart of the problem.
Yeah. I have a question from Christiane van der Trappen, who puts an interesting issue on the table. So I think one of the complexities of working on curbside access is also that people want to make sure that the current approaches will not hamper future new innovations that might make use of the curbside, and then or the curb as such, and then delivery robots come into view, or there are different names to call these objects, but it's basically the kind of the automated autonomous pods that would run on the sidewalk, for instance, or would move from the even to the door. So how does that? How do you look at this specific technology in your struggle to manage the curbside, but also maybe a more general question, like how do we take actions to solve current problems, or to what degree do we take into account these future innovations? Yeah.
Well, I think that's a perfect example of what we were starting to do and then found essentially, which is, so how can new technology help, and also what are our responses to new challenges? For example, having automatic bots running on the footway, and that's really I talked about. I think we took this is back from the future. What kind of streets do we want, and what is the framework we set in place to allow that to happen? So that we don't want bots running around, moving around freely, where we've got people partially sighted, people who can't deal with that. So think about what kind of street we're creating. Harness the new technology or potentially prevent it, and of course it can be spatially constrained, if you like, quite straightforwardly. If we don't do these two things, which is think about what kind of street is this supposed to be, what do we want to happen here, how do we let this happen? If we don't have that joined up approach, then everything that might come from the future, and I suppose what I'm saying is, and this is absolutely not a commentary on capitalism at all, market-led approach, this idea that the thing I finished with about that is managing and thinking about what should happen in the street through consultation. And if we're not setting our parameters for how we might use this new technology, it'll be a different kind of mess in the future rather than more organized. So we need to have some of these structures in place, this framework for use, and to manage it effectively through partnership, obviously, in order for these things to work effectively. Otherwise, as I said, it'll just be a new kind of mess. I think one of the obvious things that you've mentioned there is, where do these new things go? One of the things, Uber type of taxis, which is they don't really even like they can stop in the middle of the carriageway and people will suddenly run in and run out. You know, how does that work? And so, you know, that's almost intentional double parking. And of course, one of the things that technology offers, and there was it's not just about how do we manage what happens in a street, it's how do we manage first place as well. And there's a real opportunity. This doesn't happen in the street, at least not at these times, which helps to simplify.
Okay, thank you. There's a final question of Diogo, which also relates to a question that Manon has put forward. It's the question to what degree the public is involved and how you see that happen, because of course this is and there is this sense of ownership. I even have to clean my curbside as a citizen in Belgium. We have the duty to de-ice and to keep clean. So there's some kind of ownership. Yeah. So I think how do you see the people's engagement to understand and for the local authority to understand this very localized needs about their curb, let's say. Yeah.
I'm in danger of repeating myself, but I think that's exactly the point. When you have a public authority, they're also responsible for engaging with them. Every street is different. It's the wonderful, beautiful complexity of streets, which I absolutely adore. They're places, to be honest. The streets are impossible places, which what makes them so interesting and exciting, but they're used by everybody. So coming back to my previous answer, which is, you know, if it's clear that we want people to use it like this, then we can't allow that, or we just must constrain that use. And it's a question that's often asked in street design. We talk about placemaking. And what does that mean? Well, you can't know place this street, this given street right here, right now is supposed to be, unless you speak to the people who are its users. And perhaps especially to the people who would be its users, because they live nearby, but they don't use it at the moment because they're excluded for one reason or another. So there needs to be some really high local engagement to do that. And of course, then you need to build that out into a sense of network. The best way I can leave this is the fact that one of the great things that's said about automatic vehicles that they will, you know, there's a real inbuilt safety in AVs, and you think, okay, that's great. But what that means is if I just want to cross from one side of the street to the other side of the street, the vehicles can't get through. In a busy street full of people, there will be no ability for cars, those automated vehicles, because they'll constantly be stopping by people who know they can step out. At one level, that's great, but it does mean they'll use that street just for ordinary traffic. Unless we're prepared to put barriers at the roadside, like we have at the curbside, like we have on some of our. Is that what we want? So it's this idea of thinking what's going to happen here and managing on that basis. And you can only think about what should happen here by engaging with local people and users.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I'm seeing that I'm not good at timekeeping, so we really have to stop. It's very interesting.
Sorry.
I would like to invite you to answer to a number of questions in the Q&A as well. You can have that. You can do that, and that would be nice, because we have to move to the next speaker, which is Dylan Khélif, and he makes my life very complex, because I started a diet yesterday to get over my corona kilos, and his title of his presentation is "Mass is a Piece of Cake," and his thesis is that not so long ago mass was not on the menu, and today it's actually the go-to recipe for a lot of cities. A lot of cities are looking into this. So he has a presentation where he looks at the ingredients that are needed to launch an oven-ready mass. So that's really great to hear, but difficult for me to digest, to stay in the jargon. Anyway, Dylan has studied international business management at the Aix-Marseille University. He is the business development manager for Europe for Cityway, and Cityway has worked for 20 years now on developing white label mobility digital solutions for local governments. And in that way, it's a pioneer in this field that is expanding its expertise en masse all over the world. So I would say, Dylan, please go ahead. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey ho, let's go.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ivo. Do you guys see my screen? Everything
Yes,
is
yes.
All right. So let's go. Well, when I was told this was running another event, I was like, all right, sounds interesting. When I was told perhaps I would have the opportunity to talk at this event, I was like, okay, that sounds interesting. And I was told I would get involved in a Pecha Kucha session. I was like, all right, that really sounds interesting. And then I went to Google to find out what was a Pecha Kucha. I was not sure about how I should deal with it, what I could say, what topic I could talk about. And then after long minutes of reflection, I was like, we're not dealing about the hot topic we are all talking about. And I'm sure you know exactly what topic I'm talking about because it was written at the first page on the title of my presentation. MaaS, mobility as a service, today's topic, right? I'm not going to tell you whether it's good, bad, or trying to convince you that this is the future of mobility, because of course it is. No, I just wanted to get back for once all together to the basics. So to all MaaS experts here listening to this speech, did it ever happen to you that when someone asks you what you're currently working on, the right answer just doesn't come? You just don't want to look too expert, but at the same time, you don't know how to simplify things because you're afraid to miss the core idea? So let's simplify things together, right? When I first arrived at Cityway, I didn't know very much about MaaS. Actually, I didn't know very much about mobility. I had to learn on the job, asking questions. I had to be curious, and to be really honest, things seemed really complicated for a beginner like me, you know, because MaaS is a topic where there is so much to say, so much to think, with so many challenges, actors, interest, that this is pretty hard to make it simple, right? And even harder when you try to explain it to your 6-year-old nephew. So what I propose for today's session is that we all get back to the fundamentals easily. And to illustrate this, let's take a cake. A big one with chocolate, with hard chocolate, and topping at the top like coconuts or candies. Can you imagine it? So now for those who stay with us, instead of going to the kitchen, ask yourself, what do I actually need to make a cake? What are the ingredients? What are the tools? To make a good cake, you're gonna have to mix different ingredients, right? And each of them will have a special role to play to the success of your recipe. So if you want to impress mother-in-law, who will be the target of this cake, you will have to use your best skills and ingredients to make the cake a wonderful culinary experience. On the contrary, if you miss only one ingredient, your cake wouldn't even be a cake in the end. And if you made everything the right way, but with the wrong tools, if you serve it in the wrong plate, even though you'll have a cake, you're gonna have a bad experience. My point is, this is exactly the same for MaaS. MaaS is a mix of different ingredients. You can choose what you put in there, decide the flavor, how it should taste, and the topping you want to add on top to improve and personalize the final experience. Now you're gonna tell me, okay, come on, what are the MaaS ingredients? And thanks for asking. First things first, data. Without data, no MaaS. MaaS is a platform, and data is the starting point for any platform. And it is what is going to give it, consistency. Building a MaaS relies on having a reliable data, as making a cake relies on having a reliable flour. But now we have this data, what's next? APIs. Okay, I said we won't go too much into technical details because what we want is keeping things simple. APIs here is going to make the link between ingredients like eggs. Even though you don't know exactly how it works, believe me, having good APIs is excellent for what's coming next. Mobility partners. Now we are trying to look for the core of the cake, which is going to give its original flavor. Why would you eat an apple cake if there's no apple in there? It doesn't make any sense, right? Mobility partners such as public transport, taxis, parking, or bike sharing are the essential elements that will attract people and make them eat your cake. When it comes to the feature now, we are talking about, of course, as mobility partners, the core ingredients like sugar in a cake. The first feature we are looking for this purpose is the one giving reliable information for planning, timetables, next departures, and route descriptions, basically everything, in fact, to be well prepared for the trip. Booking. Booking is a little bit, what you don't necessarily expect when you're using a travel app. Generally, you first want to get informed and then having the possibility to pay, right? So when you realize that you can actually book a taxi, it's a little bit like this vanilla flavor you can taste at the tip of the tongue, right? And then pay. Getting informed is great. Booking is awesome. Paying is wonderful, don't you think? As I said, this is one of the most important features. This is basically what it's going to bring people to use other modes of transport and improve the travel experience. And the very last ingredients that can actually make your cake the most special cake in the world, it is the user experience. Building a good mass platform which works is good. Combined with a great user experience is perfect. This is why you should do everything in mind that the best way to keep users and get them back to the app is to provide a smooth and seamless experience. And in the end, what would be a cake if there's no one to enjoy it? What you need actually is the confirmation that all your ingredients were incorporated the finest way. So you need to call for a team before it goes to the final clients. They are going to be the beta tasters. And this is how actually you can run a math. And we did it several times. And very briefly, I take the occasion of this final slide to share some words about my company, Cityway, providing white label mobility digital solutions for local authorities for the past 20 years, experts in mass, and expanding its developments all around the world. So now, if you really want to talk with me about mobility, journey planning, ticketing, on-demand transport, of course you can contact me. But I hope you guys had a good time. And now you know that if someday you're 6 years old and if you ask you if mass is hard to make, you can just answer, of course not. Mass is a piece of cake. Thank you.
Thank you, Dylan. Very, very nice. Great presentation. Also, Martin says that yeah, he says you have to be sure you have the fresh ingredients. To stay in the logic of food, there's Nicholas who writes, okay, and how do we avoid cannibalizing sustainable modes like public transport, for instance? So how does your system make sure that we guide people to the most sustainable modes and public transport?
Sorry, I will. Can you please repeat the question? Sorry.
The question is, how do you make sure that mass is not cannibalizing the public transport? So.
All right, that's a pretty hard kind of. I mean, public transport is one of the core ingredients, for good mass. We always say that public transport is the backbone of mobility as a service, as people will first use a travel app to use public transport to make them help using the public transport. So to answer the question, I would say that mass wouldn't even cannibalize public transport, but that would be more like two teammates playing in the same field.
Thank you. I have a question. Who is the cook? Who is behind the who is the chef and who is the sous chef in the in your
that's a pretty good one. Yeah. So of course here we can understand this is a question about the governance, I believe, and so to be well, there's no one ideal scheme for mass governance. For us at Cityway, we work for local authorities, so there would be actually the chef of the cake, and we would be the little hands that make it. And we think, and I do believe that this is how it works the best. I don't hear you. Perhaps you mute yourself.
I see a lot of very positive comments on your presentation, and I will leave you to answer in writing, because we have to move on in terms of timing. But thanks a lot. I was also thinking that maybe if there's a lot of cakes being baked around Europe, we should have a guide Michelin, or a way to also assess the quality of all these cakes, and come up with a neutral scoring tool. But okay,
it's a good idea.
Thank you.
Thank you very much,
Dylan. So you move to the Q&A, where you can answer also the questions that have been left unanswered due to the time, because we have to move on, and we move to Diogo Martins. He is the CEO of Cityway, and he has worked on the accessibility data model that was developed with the European Commission's DG Move. The idea is to standardize public transport accessibility information. Diogo has been a train enthusiast since he remembers, which has led to a passion about transport and urbanism. He was very active in several, or is active in several, Lisbon pedestrian accessibility planning processes, and he also has worked as an inclusive design manager at Sustrans. So I give Diogo the floor, and I will use the notorious words 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey ho, let's go.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm here to talk about the accessibility data model and how to use it on existing and future infrastructures with real passengers. As we're going to see next, we have created this. We have this situation where we all want high quality information, and better data models will allow us to collect this information. These models have to answer this question: what do people want? So, the accessibility data model allows us to collect information. It is ready for digital use, and it is flexible enough to be used on existing infrastructures, but also on future ones. The data model has functional components and has accessibility level to evaluate these components, and has personally relevant information, which is things that matter for individuals. The functional components are things that are present everywhere, so everyone uses them. They are things like entrance, ticketing, moving around, and lighting, and wayfinding and exiting. These are important, and they actually impact everyone's experience while using public transport. So the accessibility level is the scale we use to evaluate each of those functional components. By using this scale, we get a precise picture of how people experience infrastructure and how accessible it is. We defined a base group of passengers profiles who can give us this information and provides a wide range of needs and requirements. Awards don't take into consideration these needs and requirements. Therefore, we have things like card orient, where people still have bad experiences. This is just a sample from the data we collected while trialing the data model in Lisbon, and it doesn't give us the worst part of the Orient train station, but is very clear that the awards doesn't reflect the real passenger experience, and that's why we need passengers to evaluate these infrastructures. It's not just possible with awards about design. That's why we trialed the model in Lisbon back in 2019, and this provides us very useful insights. We provided training which doesn't influence the evaluations, and we got this outputs, the accessibility level, which we talked about before, the specific items, which are things which are very useful for each individual, and the assessment for each place, which describes how it is. So we faced many different challenges like this one, and this allowed us to collect a lot of different information about the way people experience places while moving between each one of them, and how we face these obstacles while traveling. It is also important to understand how the model behave against different infrastructures, and that's why we traveled between many different infrastructures in Lisbon, including the Lisbon cruiser terminal. We also evaluated many complex intermodal infrastructure, but also small ones like this bus stops in the middle of the street, and we get it. It is quite interesting to understand. It is ready for large scale and small scale evaluations. It is flexible enough to be used on many different infrastructure types and future ones. It is possible to be used on crowdsourcing apps and many other systems. It is possible to connect to the infrastructure like elevators, and it is possible to be used on mobility as a service apps. There are many things to talk about from the data model, and it was a really amazing experience. Feel free to reach us and learn more, and of course put your questions on the chat. So thank you everyone, have a good day.
Don't think I'm already online. Yes, hi. Thank you, Diogo. Very interesting. There's a couple of questions in the Q&A. There's the question of your dear friend Pedro, who asks whether the data is actually, the plan is to use that in trip planners, I think, in wayfinding and online applications. Is that so? Is that the purpose?
Yeah, the original idea precisely to be used on these travel planners, and as also the previous presenter said, this is mass systems. So the idea is to provide information about how accessible our infrastructures and how people use them. So that's the model answers that question. It is possible to collect this information as I mentioned before, but this is really designed to be used on this, but it's not just this. You can also use this on planning, on a political decision and policy decision, etc. So it is very flexible in terms of usage.
Yeah. So you explained how you have demonstrated and tested it yourself, and there's a question of anonymous. I hope that's not the hacker collective, but just the person who didn't fill in his his details. Whether this is also relevant in other European cities, and maybe whether you have already experience with other locations.
Yes, while developing the model, we try to make sure this is not a Lisbon model. So
Okay. Yeah.
it is not something that you are only going to use this here specifically on our infrastructures and with the way you reuse these infrastructures, because we are aware that, for example, for detecting functional components, it is different everywhere. So even in Lisbon, is not the same thing from one infrastructure to another. For example, if you use a train station, the train station doesn't work in the same way a metro station works. So you have to consider this in terms of the practical tests and trials on your city. But the model allows that to be done. So that's what we did in Lisbon. Like we trialed many different infrastructures because of these specific differences, and that's why, for example, you can evaluate, and we did it. We evaluated the airport. The airport is a very complex infrastructure and works completely different from any other infrastructure, but you can actually work on that and evaluate the ticketing there. It is completely different, as you know, but it works.
Yes. Yeah. Okay, one final question, and then we have to move on. It's a question again from anonymous who asks whether this is a crowdsourcing tool or whether this is more. It would be an expert audience and who would complete the data sheets, and whether this is. How do you see a further completion or collection of data? Yep.
I see this to be used in both ways. So I think, and from the trial, we understand that quality of information will be better if collected by experts. It doesn't need to be exactly people who work on the field, but you can just have a group of people and go out with them and have these forums and things, and also perform these evaluations on the ground with people. But we developed this thinking about crowdsourcing because it is quite more simple. You can have high quality information anyway, because you can manage to have a system that collects it in a very precise way. But of course, you have different challenges then. So, for example, how many people are going to engage with these crowdsourcing systems? We saw in the past with many apps about accessibility, which just failed, and they failed because they couldn't actually engage with people in an effectively way. So that's the hardest part is implementing the crowdsourcing part of the model on a system that effectively engage with people and make people collaborate with this system.
While maintaining the quality, indeed. Okay, thank you, Diogo. We have to go to the next speaker, but thank you a lot. There are more questions in the Q&A, so if you could take a look there, that would be great. One of the questions, by the way, is from my colleague Laura Babío, who will be the next speaker. Her presentation is titled "Green and Tough." Describes Laura as a person. She will be talking about integrating resilience in sustainable urban mobility planning. And just to give a bit of background, with COVID-19, the European Commission asked a number of urban mobility stakeholders to produce guidance on COVID-19 and mobility in view of existing guidance on sustainable urban mobility planning. And we have worked on that, but the story became a bit bigger, and we have prepared a document that is about not only about COVID-19, but about resilience in general. But I give the floor to Laura with the words 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey ho, let's go.
Well, not yet, but almost.
Almost.
Okay, great. So, good morning, everyone. Hi. So, as Siva said, my name is Laura, and I come here to present a topic that hasn't been discussed at all within the past few months, which is resilience, but also, as Siva said, this guidance on how to integrate this concept in the sustainable urban mobility planning. So, I was challenged to this presentation. Hope I have my tour guide skills. So, what is resilience, really? The term resilience describes the capacity of a system to resist, but also, most important, to adapt and to transform itself. Just like Lindsay Lohan in the fantastic movie Mean Girls, memes only for millennials here. But really, it's about anticipating, reducing vulnerability, the ability to learn and to respond to crisis. And we need to increase resilience in our transport, in our cities, to prepare for future crises, to be ready to have minimal disruption in our systems when they come, because they will come. Effects derived from climate change that we are already experiencing nowadays in some places, other pandemics that will come, and in general, to be prepared for future crises. The resilient city is one that has a resilient strategy that tackles all urban systems in an integrated way, that reduces vulnerability, that increases the capacity to respond to shocks, but also to absorb, to adapt, and to recover from them, and that involves all citizens and stakeholders. In our SAMP, in our guide, we didn't start from zero. We built up from existing work, and we used the 7 resilient principles by the Rockefeller Foundation as a starting point for our work, which was really to find a way on how to apply these principles for sustainable mobility planning. And our approach was really co-creational, involving relevant stakeholders. The initiative was led by Ruprecht Consult and POLIS within the Civitas framework, and we really reached out to many European projects to collaborate and really to share the knowledge that they have in their respective mobility fields. The guide was published last February at a time that we consider extremely relevant for cities, and we really try to use these 7 principles as a guiding thread. First, explaining the relationship between resilience and urban mobility, but also then explaining concrete measures on how to increase resilience. But really, what are these principles? First is reflectiveness, which is the capacity of a system to reflect continuously in its own revolution. So it's really about continuously monitoring to identify new mobility trends, but also to analyze the trends that are already established and to really understand how the system changes, to have a complete understanding of the system. Very relevant to the second principle, which is flexibility, which is about the system that can change, evolve, and adapt to changing circumstances. And it's in flexibility where new knowledge and new technologies are going to be key enablers for this quality in cities. The third is robustness. Wrecking Ball, if you're thinking about Miley Cyrus, you are right, a robust girl, but not really. Robustness is about having a well-conceived, well-constructed system that can withstand the impacts from disruption. And in the case of mobility, it's about reducing the dependency of motorized transport. Redundancy, a system that can accommodate, that has a spare capacity to accommodate the disruption. So having the ability to use different planned options in case the system fails, having this, having the overlaps, established overlaps. So really overall increasing connectivity. The fifth, resourcefulness. It's about having the ability to rapidly find new ways to meet needs under situations of stress, or what we have called always in my city, to be prepared, to increase the capacity to have a capacity to anticipate, to have emergency plans prepared to respond. The sixth, inclusiveness. It's about inclusive system. It's that one that is designed for everyone, that it involves all stakeholders and communities, and that really addresses the shocks and how they affect different groups, identifies vulnerabilities for everyone, and promotes inclusive public transport, inclusive modes of transport, sorry. Seventh, and last, integration, which is really refers to the integration of the urban mobility system with the other systems from the city, which really is crucial to have an exchange of information, a build-up of, have a formal establishment of cooperation, and different mobility measures. In our guide, we really wanted to see how the different mobility measures increased these qualities and therefore made the city more resilient. But of course, these measures are not really exclusive. One measure can help increase many qualities, such as it investing in public transport, cycling, or walking, that can make the city inclusive, robust, flexible. Or also we can look at demand management strategies like urban vehicles access regulations or parking. These are actually measures that allow for great adaptability, and investing in them will make the city more reflective, flexible, resourceful, and robust. And really what we wanted in our city, in our guide, was to understand how can all of these measures contribute to each principle. And we ask all of these contributor projects to respond to this question. We scaled their contribution from 1 to 5, and you can see the results here with the highest scores with the systems that, with the measures that comprise entire systems. And also we wanted to integrate the concept of resilience in the development of SUMPs. So Ruprecht Consult gave a spin to their cycle, integrating concrete actions on resilience, like resilience leadership, scenario building, data collection, on financing resilient measures. But really, how can this help, this guide at the end, help cities increase their resilience? Well, it can help them reduce the vulnerability. It can help them prepare for disruption. It can help them apply these 7 principles. But more important overall is really that it can help integrate this concept in the framework of the SUMP. And if really I want you to take something away with you in this presentation, besides leaving you eager to read this fantastic guide we developed, is really to understand the link between resilience and sustainability, because we cannot have one without the other. So really, if we want to achieve one, we need to include the other one in our planning, because resilience and sustainability go hand in hand. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. I saw a question of Nicolas that I have answered in the meantime. Nicolas Sieber, who asked a question about CO2 reduction calculations. So that's been taken care of. And I don't see other questions.
Well, I have a remark then. Well, there are no questions. I just had like in LinkedIn a few weeks ago, someone asked me to how could they plan with all of this uncertainty and demand, how could they consider this for the planning? They were once again trying to plan for a demand that we don't know, which the key is really to plan for resilience, to be prepared to deal with the uncertainty. So you can be flexible, adapt, you don't have to fix to a demand. It seems that there is still this old concept that you have to plan for the demand rather than to nudge it a little bit for when you want it to be,
Yeah. Okay. That's a good comment. So I think time-wise we'll move on, but keep an eye on the chat also and the Q&A. Maybe there's more you want to answer, and we'll move to another POLIS staff member, which is Manon Coyne. She's project officer at the POLIS network. She has been great at managing slides, but she has much more in her portfolio, of course. She joined POLIS in 2020. She is interested to make keep society mobile and keep people moving and traveling. She has worked in railway and automotive companies before. And one of the things you might not know, she also speaks Russian. So I give the floor to Manon, who will give an overview of a number of European initiatives we are involved in. So Manon, 1, 2, 3, 4, hey ho, let's go.
Okay, thank you very much, Ivo. So after this patchwork of European mobility innovations that we just had, I'm here to present what POLIS is doing for these innovations. Because guess what? POLIS is not only about networking, it is also a busy bee working on many European research projects, and this is the core of my job at POLIS. So what is POLIS? As a reminder, it is primarily a network of cities, regions, transport authorities, research institutes located all around Europe, as you can see on this map, but it is also acting for urban transport innovations by organizing working groups on specific topics, but also by participating in the realization of European projects. Why is POLIS a great place to work at? Because our members represent the local context, which is the real life of people, and because the way you move represents who you are, and the diversity of identity of people is reflected in the diversity of topics that we are handling at POLIS. And what I will try to do in this presentation is to give you an extract of the flavor of the bouquet of mobility topics that we are handling. So drones. This is one of the flavors of this bouquet. Drones are scary. They sound like war. But on the other hand, they can bring emergently needed medication and connect suburbs with city centers at a lower cost than the building of new roads or railways. And we have a project at POLIS working on the safe use of drones. UZEPE develops rules and principles for drones flights so that several drones that would fly at the same time do not bump into each other or into helicopters or into any other object that would fly at the same altitude. So it makes drones more civil, less warlike, and safer. Another flavor of the bouquet is labor. This is a topic that has been much underestimated in the urban transport innovation community. Questions like, will robots replace our drivers, our builders, our deliverers? Or is this a life condition improvement? And is this safe? Or very important? Luckily, we are also involved in a project on this topic. We Transform is reflecting on the transition of jobs in the transport sector following the automation and the digitalization of mobility solutions. So it's basically trying to make the square fit the circle with inputs from all possible sides. So there is a common tie between all the topics that POLIS is handling. And this is the frame. How do you deal with innovations which are so many, so diverse, and with implications on so many areas? Well, you need a frame. You need a link between all these innovations. You need rules. And we also have a project reflecting on the frame. And it has a cool name, by the way. Gecko. It sounds very Italiano. Well, probably I like it because most of our team is Italian currently. So anyway, this project works on the governance and ruling of new mobility solutions. So that is making rules for things that just popped up or are not even there yet. So you got it. Framing is making rules for innovations. But unfortunately, rules don't just pop up like new mobility services do. They must be built with a careful process. And the process to build and implement regulations must be learned and trained. As in the Dynaxability for CE project. This project supports cities in learning and setting up rules for connected and automated driving, mobility as a service, and vehicles access to cities. It focuses on cities in Central Europe, that is Italy, Croatia, well, and Poland, Hungary, and Germany, of course. So once you have built your regulations, you need to share them so that people respect them. So you have to make them understandable and raise awareness about them. And what's the best way to raise awareness on something among people nowadays? Try to guess. Well, you got it, smartphones. That's the objective of the Uberbox project, making regulations on vehicles' access to cities available on people's smartphones and other navigation services, of course. So to this end, the project supports the digitization of the measures through a set of tools called the Uberbox. But the issue is, well, you know the issue. You have something valuable, like a sand shovel or information on road traffic, for example, and you don't want someone else to take it from you. But this is not what sharing is about. Sharing is caring. And sharing is caring is a culture, which the Mobi Data Lab project is working on. Well, it's basically working on promoting this culture in Europe. It provides theoretical information on one side and new tools and ideas to support actors in sharing and reusing mobility data. And it also builds a community of interested stakeholders. So as we said, regulations do not pop up, but mobility services do. So beyond setting a frame to anticipate innovations, we need to reflect on their integration in already existing transport management and plans. Like Play-Doh, how do you insert new forms and colors to have a beautiful and harmonious culture in the end? So this is what the Momentum project is working on, analyzing emerging transport modes, new mobility servicing solutions that pop up, and providing tools to include them in cities' transport management plans. And they are doing great in giving a sense of what the new solutions look like in cities. You should check out their website because it really gives the impression to enter a city. Another project analyzing impacts on innovations in real life is Levitate, but it concentrates on only one new mobility mode. And can you guess which one from the name? Well, it's not a flying mode. It's connected automated vehicles. But you can still make good jokes about the name. My colleague involved in the project pretends that he can sit without a chair. So beyond moving a body without touching the ground, Levitate assesses impacts of automated transport in different scenarios. And one of these scenarios is automated transport of goods. Automated transport of goods is very useful to bring goods in a safe way in case of emergency, as in this picture, for example. Well, another topic that drones are useful for. And so coming back to the first flavor of this presentation, the loop is complete. And if you want to dive off in any of the flavor that I presented you, let us know. And now, if you want to add any new flavor to our bouquet, please get in touch.
Okay, thank you, Manon. Very interesting. It gives a good overview of what's daily life at POLIS is about. And one of the topics you have highlighted is Uvarbox, where we try to work on digital data for urban vehicle access regulations. We'll also dive into that. I don't see. There's one question in the Q&A that I will.
The question is about my favorite one.
What is your favorite one? Asks Anonymous.
Well, my favorite one is the first one that I started working on, which is the Uberbox. Also because it provides a concrete product, the availability of a service through the smartphone. So it's very easy to work on that project. And also because I like the people working in it.
Okay, that's a very good segue to the next speaker, which is Lucy. She's also active in that project. So thank you, Manon. We'll move on due to time constraints and my poor timekeeping. So with 25 years of experience in air quality and transport policy, Lucy is a renowned expert of urban vehicle access regulations. She's the go-to person in Europe about this topic, and in the project she will reveal. She's also the ambassador for Europe on the topic. Lucy is the brain and hands behind the EU-wide information service Urban Access Regulations.eu since 2007. And she led the London Mayor's air quality team before that, producing the first London-wide air quality strategy. which also led to the congestion charge and the London low emission zone. But in her presentation, she goes beyond the low emission zone. We are looking in Reveal into urban zero emission zones, and this is combining climate action as well as air quality action. So I give the floor to you, Lucy. 1, 2, 3, 4. Hey ho, let's go.
Okay, I'm talking about the POLIS project that Manon didn't mention, the Reveal project, looking not only at low emission zones, zero emission zones, but also other access regulations. We have, it's a 3.5 year Horizon 2020 project with 6 cities, Helmond, Jerusalem, etc. 6 cities, 8 case studies. Development process are being produced and piloted. And a toolkit will be developed, which will include guidance notes on different aspects, building blocks to combine to get a tailored ULVA development process, aim to put the advice that we're giving our pilot cities into a form for others to use. This is the building blocks diagram, the zero emission zones, which is the measure field I lead, then spatial interventions, which is changing the road so that to change how people drive, pricing measures and future options. And these all go together, mostly picking several of different building blocks from each of those together. The cross-cutting themes on the left, mobility concepts, making sure people can actually travel and get to the area of people and goods, user needs and acceptance, governance and financing, and ensuring compliance. Putting these together with the salt and pepper of complementary measures that often make sure that the action can happen. Each of the measure fields is got different building blocks within them, and I'm showing the one from zero emission zones, pathways to zero emission zones, traffic limited zones. This is some of the selection one of our cities has done, combined with a similar selection of different other measure fields. Whoa. So choose different building blocks with the cross-cutting themes. Having the building blocks in front of you makes many cities have gone, I hadn't thought about adding this. Let's add this as well to make this more complete, more successful, and achieve the goals that the city wants. It's under development. Watch out for it when it comes. Go to our newsletter. What we found is important is co-creation involving internal and external stakeholders, all the people that you need to make it happen. Several iterations looking through, meetings, workshops, and the building blocks open up other options. These are the building blocks selected for our 6 cities. You can see there's lots of different ones put together to your building blocks. Helmond, Jerusalem, and London are the ones looking at zero emission zones. So some of these schemes building blocks are planned, and some already there. Helmond's looking at a new build area with zero emission zone from construction to use. London and Jerusalem is also looking in the future outside the project at zero emission zone. Two of the other cities are also doing emissions aspects. There are 2 ways to zero emission zones. One is to remove the vehicles, and there are lots of other ways of getting goods and services into the area without the vehicle, and the other to remove the combustion engine from the vehicle, to electric or fuel cell vehicle. 2 different aspects. Often they and the 2 ways to remove the vehicle, spatial interventions, physical changes to the road length to prevent or use or access of different parts of the road network, or traffic limited zone, banning entry with penalties or bollards to stop entry, requirements to enter. Requirements can be emissions as well. The best cases offer a combination of the both. Even the most extreme mover, a pedestrian area, meaning street cleaning vehicles, large deliveries. So reduce the vehicles and see that the vehicles that need to enter are then zero emission. And how many you don't need vehicles. The City of London is an example of this. They have real problems at peak areas with pedestrian levels, have problems with traffic flows, emissions, loading activity. They want more space for people and walking. 90% of the trips in the central London square kilometre are on foot, and they have a huge loading problem. So they started off wanting a zero emission zone and then realised, first we reduce the number of vehicles to give the space to the pedestrians, and then require those vehicles that are allowed to be zero emission. At the moment, they're restricting the access in time zones so that there's many times for the people to walk. The spatial interventions, they're realizing that they can do spot changes or one-way streets to achieve their goals and reduce the congestion and improve the flow. Sorry about that distraction. Geofencing, they're looking at intelligent speed assistance for trial within Reveal to limit speed, particularly taxis or delivery vans. Geofencing for automatically switching the engine from a combustion to a electric mode at the boundary, and also to try to control e-scooters to make sure they're parked in bays. On geofencing, we have a guidance available for geofencing specifically with UVARs. Please look at that on our website. And the Reveal webinar ensuring compliance has presentation for the ISA use, and there's a report that will be on the website in the next few weeks. And the toolkit of the guidance, the first 4 are on the cross-cutting areas are already published. Geofencing and permits and exemptions, it's quite useful to know the difference and the opportunities there. The other guidances will be expected in autumn 2001. The cross-cutting themes, we have webinars every Tuesday in June at 1600 Central European time. Presentations and the recordings will be on the website from Monday. But please register, click on the link and register for these webinars. Thank you for your attention. The UVAR box, please, if you're on UVARs, make sure people know about them. They can't comply with a scheme they don't know about. So do the UVAR box. If you want to know more about general urban access regulations in Europe, our website, and also the Reveal website. That's me, and
Great.
I hope I was not too fast and understandable, and do apologize for the interruption and distraction.
No problem, Lucy. I don't see any questions in the chat or the Q&A, but maybe it's maybe a bit of a personal question, not so much on the content, but so Reveal is a project that's now running for two years. The first research and innovation project on the topic of access regulations since long. I mean, the previous ones have finished somewhere, late noughties, you say, or nillies, 2007, 2008. So I mean, are we doing the right thing in the project? Is it spot on for what is needed at the moment, or where do you see future action needed if Reveal doesn't answer all questions?
It's interesting. The Reveal started off to being database driven, have these examples of case studies, and it's really evolving from what the pilot cities are needing, and saying, okay, what's needed are, we realized we needed the guidance on geofencing. The toolkit is coming together in the process of thinking how you develop them. On the top of my head is trying to think about what needed in the future. I think the UVAR box may need some outreach afterwards to get it outreached. The UVAR box is working with 5 countries at the moment to get the tools, and we really do hope as many cities as possible get involved with that. It's something I've been working on for ages, trying to get the information out there. If you've got a scheme that nobody knows about, they can't comply. Or you get lots of fines, and that's not what cities need. The cities need compliance rather than the fines. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No. I think, yeah, it does. I mean, it also shows that we were looking for, what we know from cities is that they are waiting for tools to bring access regulations into the 21st century, and bring in the new technologies, make it more efficient, fair.
It's not only new technologies, because what I'm finding, I come from the low emission zone aspect, and working together with spatial interventions, which haven't traditionally been, I mean, they're not in the normal definition of an UVAR. And it's I would have called them complementary measures to support it. Once you've got less vehicles, you can have a bus lane. But it's looking the other way around. If you take it, and it's really interesting to see how some of our cities, I want a zero emission zone. Oh, actually a traffic limited zone, and actually spatial developments, and the toolkit of these building blocks allowing you to kind of cities not to have to reinvent the wheel, so those, but also to broaden horizons. We've done what part of the process we're using at the moment is with workshops, with bringing the people in from either from the police, for the enforcement, or for the different departments in the city, and bring them in to have their inputs, and they'll be needed anyway later on to enforce or to do the scheme, and bring them into the process to start ownership of the process, rather than this is what we decided, you sort it. Saying okay, they have brilliant insights, and it makes it much more successful in the end. The schemes that have brought people in with a co-creation with also in the stakeholders, they're going to have to adapt to the scheme. But we need this. Everybody will say we need this special thing, and the art of the city is to say which one's relevant, which one do we say yes, you need access, but not your own vehicle like you'd like. We'd have access differently. We'll ensure the access, but maybe not on your own mode of choice.
Okay, thank you. We'll leave it at that. And I would like to, if they are still around, invite the speakers back on stage to give a thank you. So if Uwe, John, Dylan, Diogo, Laura, Manon can join Lucy and myself for a final snapshot also on the video that's been made of this session, that would be great. Thanks a million. And I think you did a great job. I did a job that was 7 minutes longer than expected, so that's not really okay. But anyway, thank you very much, and we'll be in touch on all these nice.
Thank you, Ivo, for the presentation.
Bye.
It was great.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you to all.